But I think that you're strong, bright, and wise enough to do this work, to be really clear in who you came here to be, to release those old tapes, to release the indoctrination, to release the dogma, and come here as you were intended to be, God in skin. So powerful. Thank you, Celebration and the band. Absolutely stunning. And I'm watching and Becca's signing. That's my favorite song. So here we are. We're coming to the end of this month's theme, which we have been myth busting. Some religious things that we've learned from the time that we were children. We've learned that they are truth. And this month, we've really dug deep to look at, are they really? Are they really true? And so last week, we spoke about what we thought God is. And there was some overlap there with Santa Claus. And so that was kind of good to work through that and realize that God is simply energy and absolute goodness. And then 3 weeks ago, we talked about heaven. Is heaven real, right? And we came to the conclusion that heaven really is a state of consciousness. And so it makes sense that I should kind of end this whole theme with looking at Satan and hell and discerning whether that is a man-made construct or really are the fiery pits of hell, available to all of us. I don't know. So I'll start, as I've started in many of these sessions. What did you learn? What did you learn that Satan was? The devil, okay. And what did the devil look like? Horns, what else? Tail, pitchfork, red, fire, heat. Okay, good. And where did this supposed devil live? In hell. And what did he do there? What was his occupation? Torturer. Okay. What else? Tormentor. Being miserable, right. Making everyone miserable. What did I hear over here? Recruiter? Of course, the recruiter. Yes, he wants more and more folks down there with him so that he could torment, right? Okay, so let's look at those ideas. I love how much you participate. It really thrills me. So we're going to go and do a little history. We are going to look at the book, which is called The Birth of Satan, Tracing the Devil's Biblical Roots, and it's written by T.J. Ray and Gregory Mobley. And they write this. There seems to be no single event that propels Satan on his cosmic collision course with God. But one can cite a series of historical and social events that seem to have contributed to Satan's metamorphosis. The religious traditions and practices of Israel's neighbors, most notably the Canaanites, the Egyptians, and especially the Persians, are often cited as influencing Satan's rise to evil, got to do that right, evil prominence. Okay, why is that? Because these neighbors, they had a pantheon of gods. They had gods that ushered people into the underworld. They had gods that were rulers of the underworld. They had gods that had horns and hoofs. So it was kind of how it bleeds into other cultures, right? And so when we read the book in the Hebrew Bible, such as Job, Zechariah, and Chronicles, it's important to be aware that these books were written after the Jewish people were exiled, after they were exiled from Israel. And so that means they were heavily influenced by all of these other religions, especially Zoroastrianism in Persia. So the Jewish people, before they were exiled, their writings didn't have any history of damnation. Did you know that? There was no theme of damnation of those who are evil. And all punishments from God were really based on like broken covenants with God, right? But then the diaspora came and things started to change. And when I say the diaspora, I'm talking about the dispersion of the Jewish people from Israel. So here they are, these people that have been dispersed away from Israel based on war, right? And they were the elite leaders predominantly that were shoved out. What happens when in their mind they are keeping true to God, they are holding God's covenants and laws, and still bad things occur? While in ancient times, at that level of consciousness, what was discerned is that it had to be something. There had to be an adversary at work. And so soon you'll see in some of the writings now there's angels that are bearers of the chaos. And they feel like that's a little bit more palatable than having God be smiting everyone, even when they're following the laws, right? And this marks the beginning of a slow separation of the negative attributes of God and placing any disastrous events in someone else's realm. Hence, when the disasters occur, the thinking is God did not afflict this upon the people. It was the evil ones that did it. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh, wow, that's so like ancient thinking, right? But how many of us still think that attributes that we see that we claim as negative are not of God here in Unity 2021? I know you're not raising your hands, but that's okay. The early writing of the Satan, and I'm using that term specifically, it's not with a capital S, it's with a lowercase s. But in the Bible, it was known as Hasatan, which meant adversary. And this was a reference to someone behaving as if an obstacle or literally something was blocking their way. That's what Hasatan meant in the Bible. But when we get to the book of Job, it has the most fleshed out characterization of Satan. You know, Satan, the roving prosecuting attorney. And he's on the lookout for all those people who may be immoral. Well, according to theologian Dr. Elaine Pagels, she suggests that the roving prosecuting attorney theme is really based on Persia's persecution, you can say, right? The Persians were kind of spying on the Jewish people at that time. What do we know about Job? We know Job was this wealthy man, right? Lots of land, family, animals, right? We knew that. And he was faithful to God. And then the Hasatan said, well, dude, of course he's faithful to you. He's like wealthy. Life is glorious. Why wouldn't he be faithful to you? But I bet if he didn't have all of that, he wouldn't be faithful anymore. And God says, let it be so. So the Satan takes away all of Job's wealth, family, animals, gone. And Job passes the test with flying colors. He's still faithful to God. And then the Satan comes and goes, if I could attack his body, I'm sure he would not be loyal to you anymore. And God says, let it be so. And again, Job passes with flying colors. And then we don't really hear much about the Satan after Job passes these tests and his wealth is returned tenfold. But this marks a significant turning point in our exploration of Satan. For although Hasatan in Job is still featured as a member of the heavenly court, he also appears to be somewhat of an independent figure. He's roving the earth, wreaking havoc, disrupting the life of good and pious men. He seems to be taking wagers with God. There is even a certain amount of arrogance and audacity associated with this character. And if God is testing Job, one could easily justify that Hasatan is testing God. So at this point in writing, we're looking at, okay, this is a development here, and this is now Satan with a capital S is starting to morph away from the Hasatan. Remember, the Hasatan is simply an adversary, an obstacle, something that you're trying to get over. And now this is becoming an entity. So it becomes that way because it seems that Satan is no longer concerned with doing God's will. But it's not until the Israelites returned from exile that the Jewish people that remained are starting to feel like, these guys returning back, they're just like the Canaanites. You see, the people that stayed saw the returning Jews as interlopers who wanted to seize the relinquished lands and put themselves as rulers and priests of the people. Throughout history, there is a need of societies to humanize our communities and do what with other communities? Demonize them, yes. Demonize other cultures, peoples that are different than their own. The Israelites are firmly ensconced in the us versus them mentality. So the figure of Satan now becomes, among other things, a way of characterizing those people as the embodiment of transcendental forces. And as the rifts in the Jewish power continue, the struggle happens, there are those who believe they are the true keeper of God's covenant. And then Satan's character becomes more malevolent, more powerful. And we see that playing out in the apocalyptic writings. Now, I've talked about Revelation as an apocalyptic writing. There are others, such as the books of Enoch and Jubilees. And that's where Satan's character really kind of blossoms. And then names now come out, where it's Beelzebul, right? We've heard of that. Belial, Azazel. These are all names that we talk about for Satan. Now, I know many of you are like, oh, Lord, this minister loves talking about history. And I do. I'm not going to lie. I do. But what has that got to do with us today? And so then my next question to you is, who have you demonized? What? Oh, did she just ask that? Yes. Who have you demonized? Who do you see as evil? Who has become Satan in our eyes? Are they politicians? I applaud you. Just for your honesty, I applaud you. Thank you. Spiritual leader, doctors, mother, father. You see, we're still doing this. We're still creating Satan. I'm making you aware of this. We're still creating Satan. And so the question now is, can we choose to see beyond our limited knowing that just possibly they are God too? That is what we preach, right? Oneness, divine in everyone and everything. So let's shift for a moment. And let's look at the concept of hell. Where do we get that idea of eternal damnation? Right? Many of you are going to say, well, religious studies, right? From the Bible. Hell, and any resemblance of hell, was not what was depicted in the Hebrew Bible. Was not depicted in the Hebrew Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, the only term that is used is Sheol, which is S-H-E-O-L, Sheol. And that's the place where the dead went. And everyone that died would end up there. Good, bad, it didn't matter. For the Hebrew people, there wasn't a heaven where God is waiting for you and the angels resides and everyone who's good is going to go there. There was none of that in the Hebrew Bible. For them, ending was ending. And there were a few exceptions to the rule, such as Elijah and Elisha, who were lifted up in totality. So then my question to you is it possible that hell is not a location, but really a state of consciousness? Well, let's look at the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. That is something that we use a lot when we're trying to break down ideas and concepts. And here, Sheol has been translated to a word such as grave, the pit, hell. And then you're looking at Greek, Hades, right? Hades is a Greek word that is meant to be the same as Sheol and can be said to say an abode of the dead, right? But metaphysically, when we look at that term Hades, what we're talking about is really outer darkness, a place of consuming and unquenchable desires. Did you know that in the New Testament, the word hell has been incorrectly translated? Because it came from the Greek word Gehenna. Gehenna was an area outside of Jerusalem. It was the city dump. That's what it was, the city dump. It wasn't a hell about what was going to happen in the afterlife. It was referencing the city dump. And the city dump, they burned everything. So fires were going day or night. They didn't have the Environmental Protection Agency to go, no, you can't burn here, right? It was going all the time. And so this area, the specific dump area, was known for eternal fires, makes sense, right? And sadness. So when the first century people are speaking about hell, they're talking about the burning dumps. They're not talking about eternal damnation. They're using the dumps as a metaphor for our inner anguish. And by the Second Temple period, meaning the 5th century BCE, it was then that Jewish theologians started to incorporate the idea of judgment after death. So keep in mind that they're being influenced now by all of these neighbors and all these differing religions. So here we are. We're challenging the constructs of Satan and hell. And keep in mind that Satan, for the Israelites, answered their question of theodicy. Now you're like, what's theodicy? Theodicy is an attempt to justify and defend God in the face of evil. To justify God in the face of evil. If God is all-knowing and all-powerful, how can evil exist? So for the Jewish people, Satan made sense. Satan was evil. Satan is the cause of suffering in the world. They were really clever, weren't they, to create this kind of situation in making God okay and then having to create something so evil. But if we look around us at the world today, I would say that we are equally clever, right? How often do we see people using righteous indignation to destroy people, to destroy others? Humans whose egos are running their lives, justifying their behaviors that are not of love, of oneness, of inclusion. Egos that sit in judgment of others. Egos that demand others change and conform to what they want and need without care of how their soul may be destroyed in the process. Egos who believe so deeply that others are wrong, they are willing to justify lying and false accusations. Today, 2022. Sometimes it can even take that form of theology thumping. I know a lot of us have been on that receiving end of that. You know, here's what the Bible says, you're a sinner. Right? We think people may be lacking in enlightenment. We can do that here in Unity too. We can think that we're so evolved and so awake and so awoke, right? That we have to get them on the right path, right? And that right path, of course, is our path because we're on the right path, right? Or it could even be in the form of, you know, I really want you to succeed. And you know, the only way that that's going to happen is if you do exactly what I want you to do and how I want you to do it. Because I don't want to be uncomfortable, right? And my friends, if we behave this way, guess what? We are constantly creating Satan and hell in our lives. We are constantly creating Satan and hell in our lives, as opposed to creating heaven by accepting we are all of God, perfect just as we are. So I'm going to go back to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary and see what they say about heaven and hell. One does not have to die in order to go to hell. Well, that's really good news. Any more than one has to die to get to heaven. Both are states of mind and conditions which people experience as a direct outworking of their thoughts, beliefs, and acts. If one's mental processes are out of harmony with the laws of man's being, with God, with oneness, they result in trouble and sorrow. Mental as well as bodily anguish overtakes one, and this is hell. So it would seem from my research, my history, that hell is not a location, right? That the idea of Satan as a god ruling the underworld is false. Hell is our beliefs and emotions being out of alignment with oneness in spirit. That's hell, right? If we allow our ego to believe that our own path is the only correct one and all others are wrong, isn't that hell? Because that means everyone else on the planet is wrong besides me and my friends who think the same way. Hell is absorbing somebody else's belief about you. How many times have we heard, oh, you're too sensitive, you're too strong, you're too emotional, you're too soft, you're too intellectual, right? And then we absorb their thoughts as definitions of ourselves and our worth. I don't know about you, but isn't that hell? Hell is being consumed by sense consciousness to the point that we forget our purpose is to be oneness and to express God, to express love. And that's when we get so caught up in, gotta have the new car, gotta have the best looking house on the block, gotta have, all of those things, the adrenaline rushes, the sensuality, the desires. And we end up in lack consciousness and unmet expectations. Isn't that how? Yeah. So this month has been a really powerful month in looking at and questioning our theology. What is God? What is heaven? What is hell? What is Satan? What is communion? All those things I invited you to be in the question of. And sometimes that can make us feel a little uncomfortable, a little topsy-turvy, because we're questioning basically our reality. But I think that you're strong, bright, and wise enough to do this work, to be really clear in who you came here to be, to release those old tapes, to release the indoctrination, to release the dogma, and come here as you were intended to be. God and skin, nothing but love. So today I'm inviting you to do some homework. I haven't given you homework in a while. And so this week I want you to look at the areas in your life that you are creating hell. Look at those areas that you say, this has been a hell year, this has been a hell week, this is a hell job. I don't know about you, but I've said those things. Look at that. And how are you creating that hell? How are you participating in creating that hell? And make a choice to create heaven. For meditation, we are going to do the Ho'oponopono in our release work of all of this.